Hey, today is episode 60 with Dr. B.
Welcome to the Living Beyond ADHD podcast. If you're looking for a fresh perspective and actionable steps on hot topics from focus to follow-through to self-management and more, you are in the right place. Welcome your host, innovative educator, coach, and psychotherapist, Dr. B.
Hey, ADDers. Do you have trouble shifting from your current task to the next task? Or maybe you have the opposite problem, where you're shifting way too quickly from one thing to the next, and you're leaving a trail of unfinished tasks in your wake. Even though most of the executive function assessments typically look at behavioral stuff, like moving with ease from one situation to another, or activity or aspect of a problem to another, as the circumstances might require, to me, there is so much more to the understanding of shifting than just the behavioral manifestations. What about shifting your thoughts and your feelings? By that I mean, do your thoughts and feelings seem to get stuck and just keep presenting you with the same stuff over and over again? Do you want to think or feel differently, yet you can't seem to shift? I've expanded the idea of this executive function skill into the thinking and feelings realm, as well as looked at the flip side, which is shifting too often. Instead of needing to make a transition from one thing to the next and not being able to leave that initial task, what about being so good at shifting your behaviors, your thoughts, and your feelings, perhaps driven by boredom, or not, that you're constantly shifting? This can be a problem if your job or your life situation doesn't require this type of skill set. To me, as well as to my Adventures in Achievement students, that's a really important aspect of shifting. So if you relate to anything I've mentioned so far, then this episode is for you. So let's dive in and start with the traditional descriptions of shifting and move on to some descriptions a la Dr. B. To shift is to move or change, to put something aside and replace it by another, such as shifting to your next household task, or leaving your home to run errands, or stop watching the TV show to get ready for bed and sleep. Transitioning between thoughts or feelings is another aspect of shifting. Shifting is similar, but it's not quite the same as task switching or set shifting, which involves the ability to unconsciously move your attention between one task and another, except shifting is conscious, not unconscious, like these other things. Some key aspects of shifting include the ability to make transitions, to tolerate change, to have flexibility in problem solving, to switch or alternate your attention and change focus from one mindset or topic to another. And going deeper, I see the importance of addressing this skill because either you develop the ability to shift your attention, behaviors, thinking, and feelings with greater and greater ease, or you're going to remain stuck wherever you are, repeating the same ineffective patterns and not moving forward in your life. Every part of life requires us to have the ability to shift or make transitions between things. We need to shift from being in bed to getting up, to getting ready for the day, to going to work or school, to working out, or making a phone call, or getting food to eat, or taking a bathroom break, and so on. Seriously, if you can't make these transitions and keep getting stuck, whether it's critical stuff or easy stuff, whatever needs to happen can't, and there are definitely consequences. There's a time to shift, and there's a time to not shift and stay put. And we need to learn that kind of balance in life. For those of you who are great at shifting, which can result in a lot of unfinished things, you end up having to circle back around to finish up many things that are left behind or overdue, rather than just maintaining day by day. So where are you going to be able to address the traditional issues of shifting, as well as the deeper ones that I'm referring to? If you have someone that you can do that work with, that's great. And if you don't, I hope that you'll consider allowing me to be that person for you. There's a form on my Dr. Barbara Cohen website, as well as on my Adventures in Achievement website. Just putting your information into that form, and I'll email you and call you within 24 to 48 hours from the time that I receive your information so that we can chat about you, your challenges, and what solutions are available. I respond quickly when you reach out to me because time is one of those assets that can't be restored. When it's spent, you have one less day. And if you feel like your life is passing and you aren't achieving all that you want, then responding quickly is really important. How much time do any of us have? Not all that much. Time doesn't stand still for any of us, whether we're ready to move forward or not. I learned long ago that I wanted to live ready for the unfolding of my life. I didn't want to have to pass on any more opportunities because I wasn't ready and couldn't say yes when I wanted to say yes. And it's not just about shifting. There's so many more skills and strategies at the very core of what you need to be able to do in order to live a fully meaningful and successful adult life. There's no shortcuts, and there's no getting around the fact that we all need these skills and strategies, such as inhibiting, emotional control, self-monitoring, initiating, working memory, planning, organizing, monitoring tasks, and organizing materials. You also need the ability to manage yourself in time, to follow through, to actually complete tasks. Plus, there's all the emotional reasons that we do what we do to sabotage ourselves that need to be addressed if we're ever going to live free of a derailing and limited life. Now, that's a mouthful, and it's a lot to tackle. And there's no need to become overwhelmed when there's a path and guidance to achieve all of this and more. You'll understand more of what I mean when we chat. If my podcast show is the first time that you've ever been hearing about executive function skills and strategies, you're not alone. If you're an adult who received a diagnosis of adult ADHD, executive function skills should also have been assessed and discussed with you, in my humble opinion. The odds of having executive function deficits along with ADHD are very high. In fact, almost a given, if you will. And what is one critically important way that you would have learned some of these skills and strategies as a kid? Play. Not organized play, but the type of exploratory play that Dr. Stuart Brown, MD, talks about in his book, Play. How it shapes the brain, opens the imagination, and invigorates the soul. When is the last time you had a play date by yourself or with a friend? Seriously. Play is critically important to adult development, just as it is for kids. Real play gives you the freedom to explore, take risks, experiment, and be creative, all in a judgment-free zone. At least I hope it is. When you're playing, you're in the zone, in the moment, learning a lot of new things unconsciously. The point is to make time for real play, and then just play. And don't worry if you're doing it right or what you're learning, just play. Summing up, it's important to focus on the process of play rather than the outcome of playing. Today's episode is about the executive function skill of shifting and the strategies that I see as relevant for you as an adult living with ADHD or executive function deficits, as well as offering you hope, real hope. How much time do we have? Not much. So let's get to it. Today's important points, a la Dr. B's definitions, are: what is behavioral shifting and how can you start to develop it? What is thinking shifting and how can you start to develop that? What is emotional shifting and how can you start to develop that? And what is excessive shifting and how you can start to rein that in?
This podcast is sponsored by Pure Potential with Dr. B. You can head over to drbarbaracohen.com and find the podcast transcript, grade-free content, plus information on programs and services, including the groundbreaking Adventures in Achievement online coaching program and one-to-one services with Dr. B. That's drbarbaracohen.com.
Now back to being an adult with ADHD or executive function challenges in today's world. There might be many reasons why you haven't heard about executive function deficits until listening to my podcast show, and you can't change that fact. However, now that you know about them, you can get moving on what you're going to do about your deficits, as well as make the most of your strengths. I have stories to share with you, including action steps, and of course, a favorite quote of mine. But first, I want to talk about celebrating your wins, big and small, since wins are such an important part of my philosophy. Remember, what we pay attention to grows. So paying attention to what's right instead of what's wrong, that helps to generate more of what's right. It's logical. It seems simple enough. And when you acknowledge and celebrate your wins with a full heart of appreciation and authenticity, you are giving yourself a priceless gift. That is, unless you find it painful to acknowledge and celebrate your wins, which some do. If that's the case, I highly recommend that you address whatever it is that makes it necessary for you to block yourself so you can be free to appreciate all the wonders that are you. No one else may feel that way about you, and that's okay for now, because living in awe of yourself and what you learn and what you love about you is critically important to your well-being. And please, don't shortchange yourself by thinking that it's pointless or it's stupid to reward yourself for all the little things that you're supposed to do. That couldn't be further from the truth. Are you really going to make yourself wait until something huge happens to celebrate? And does that something huge happen every day? Probably not. It doesn't for me. But the kind of wins that I talk about can and often do, which is really exciting. And from what I see, celebrating wins is an absolute necessity to getting out of the emotional ditch of whatever ails you and into a better attitude and a better way of living. Based on the feedback I get, this regular practice of celebrating wins is changing lives for the better. So what's it going to be for you today? What are you going to celebrate? Maybe you've begun to develop an acceptance practice and are extending a little grace to yourself instead of poisonous negativity. That's certainly a win. Perhaps you've taken the risk to see yourself more clearly and are pleasantly surprised with what you've discovered. That's a wonderful win. Maybe you received a compliment from someone that you barely know who appreciates what you shared with them. That's definitely a win. You get the point. Celebrate all of them, big and small, and none of this half-hearted celebrating. You've got to mean it. You've got to exaggerate your emotions. Yes, wow, awesome. You want your acknowledgement and your celebration to register in your neurology with the power to move you and shift your state. Many of us need a higher level of stimulation or intensity for things to register. So if that's you, give it to yourself and exaggerate your celebration so that you can actually feel it. And listen, you're not broken or defective or less than. You're you. You have gifts and you have talents that you may not think much of, like you're really good at decorating your home, or you have a great sense of humor, or you bring a smile to people's faces when they see you, because those talents aren't paying the bills. I get it. And yet these are things that are really great about you, and they need to be appreciated and celebrated by you. You are a precious human being whose value is a given, because I'm not talking about you as the human doing that most of society views you as. And you may be missing some skills that have been making your life very difficult up to now, and yet skills can be learned. Please know that I am not making light of your struggles or unhappiness, not at all. I want you to know that there are answers to your struggles. If you're willing to be a student of your own life and develop a deeper understanding of yourself and how you're put together, and offer yourself a lot of compassion and patience, plus the time and the effort and the energy that it's going to take to make the necessary changes, these things can happen for you. I know this is true because my students are learning skills they've been missing for most of their life. And it's amazing to share in the transformation of their thinking and behaviors and aha moments. Please, don't let yourself be one of the 80% of people who don't ever make it to more permanent change, or even the 80% who want to change, but never actually end up making the changes that they want for many different reasons. There is training and support available to you to ensure, to the best of my ability, that you don't become one of the 80% who don't make it. Rather, that you're one of the 20% who do. So let's transition to some stories and action steps now. Our first story is about Roger and what behavioral shifting is, and some action steps about how you can begin to develop it. Roger was in his mid-40s and recently diagnosed with adult ADHD. He was prescribed medication to help with his ADHD symptoms, yet his life wasn't course-correcting in ways that he desperately needed it to. He was mildly depressed and anxious about his life turning around soon, given his age, because he knew that he had a lot of time and things to make up for, even though he couldn't actually do that. Neither Roger's therapist or psychiatrist were providing him with tools or skills or strategies to learn. He remembered reading in a Jim Rohn book that for things to change, you have to change. But how did he need to change? How could he know what to change or how to change it when he didn't have important data about his executive functions? Specifically, Roger would get stuck a lot of the time during the day at work when it was time to move from one task to the next. He just couldn't seem to let go of the task that he was working on. It always felt like there was one more thing that needed to be done, and he kept second-guessing himself when he was ready to move on and ended up spinning his wheels. And then there were other times when he could shift quite easily. In fact, he moved from thing to thing so quickly that it seemed like he barely looked at the task, let alone get into it and really complete it thoroughly. In the previous episode, I talked about the importance of maturity and that it's common for adults with ADHD or executive function deficits to be immature. Roger was definitely immature, and I don't mean this as a moral issue or a moral judgment, just the facts. He was self-centered, closed-minded, irresponsible. He lacked self-control and self-awareness and was very disrespectful. He was also rigid in his thoughts, pessimistic about outcomes, and dishonest with himself. Furthermore, he didn't keep long-term commitments. He felt insecure. He didn't live by his values or know how to prioritize tasks and get them done. In fact, he didn't seem to really care about any of this, even though he really did at heart. His therapist discussed this with him, and they concluded that most of the behaviors that he displayed seemed to be more about his immaturity than his inability to shift his behaviors or thoughts or feelings. In time, it became clear that his lack of shifting, or too much shifting, was directly related to his immaturity, and that until they addressed his immaturity issues, they wouldn't really know how much of the problem of his inability to shift or frequent shifting truly was a problem or wasn't. Some background facts about behavioral shifting. Individuals with shifting challenges often need adherence to routines or rituals and predictability in their environment because this facilitates a feeling of security. Using visual prompts or cues is great because it allows the person to see the big picture of the day as well as see when and where shifts are going to occur so they can be prepared in advance of the need to shift or make a transition. The more advanced notice for transitions, the more secure that person can feel. It's important to focus on one task at a time and to limit choices to only one or two, perhaps, to control for overwhelm. Training for mental flexibility with cognitive training apps like Peak Pro that I've talked about before is helpful to those who have challenges shifting. That mental flexibility, those games in that app, they're great for that. Or you can practice shifting from thing to thing yourself and get used to making transitions and letting go of things and embracing new things. It's up to you. External cues and prompts can be useful to help with shifting, like an alarm is a warning that a transition is coming soon, and then another alarm when it's time to actually shift. Setting time limits for working on one thing and then shifting to the next thing can be helpful to know when it's going to be time to shift. Having a set schedule of what is done in the morning and what is done in the afternoon or the evening can be helpful to know the predictable shifts between tasks or activities. And developing shifting habits, skills, and strategies, it takes time, it takes practice, and it does manifest if you keep going and you follow through and you continue to practice. So if you relate to Roger's story, your action steps are: focus on what you want your daily schedule or routine to be so that you can have predictable transitions and shifting. Follow through and practice sticking with the daily schedule that you created so you can get used to making transitions and shifting from thing to thing rather than resisting shifting because you're overwhelmed. When you're planning your schedule, you need to ask yourself lots of questions to determine when is the best time and how is the best way of doing something for you, because it isn't the same for everyone. Assess your transitions and shifts and ask yourself things like, what was I challenged shifting today? What did I successfully shift today? How did I handle the challenge of shifting today? How did I handle my emotions during these challenges? How did I feel about the experience or the outcome? Am I making any assumptions about shifting and my ability to shift? What are some fun and creative ways to cue myself to shift? What can I learn from today's experiences? Could I have done anything differently, and if so, what? Where could I improve for the next time that I need to shift? How should I adapt or change myself moving forward? And self-management is going to be based on the answers to the questions that you ask yourself so that you can manage the next time more effectively, more efficiently, and feel better about your outcomes when you're making transitions and shifting. So let's transition now to our second story about Donna and what thinking shifting is and some action steps about how you can develop it. Donna was in her mid-60s and wasn't diagnosed until her late 50s. She had lived most of her life with the inability to shift her thoughts when she was probably done thinking about something and just move on. Instead, the thoughts went round and round and round in her head, and she couldn't seem to let go of a thought in order to think about another thought. She had almost no flexibility when it came to solving problems and had to do things the same way every time. This really got in the way when she was working full-time because her employers always thought that she was very stubborn, very rigid, and unwilling to work as a team player. Even when someone suggested a way of doing something that was clearly a better or more effective way, she just couldn't get her mind to go along with that change of method. It kept pulling her back to the original way that she did things. Because Donna's memory wasn't all that great either, she was afraid to shift away from a thought in the middle because she didn't know if she could get herself back to the thought and where she was going with it. In fact, her thoughts had an obsessive quality to them. She would get fixated on a thought, such as eating tapioca or ice cream, and even though she knows that she needs to eat only a little of those foods if she eats them at all, she can't get herself to shift or transition from the obsessive thought and hence from eating them until they're gone. And then the natural transition or the natural shift to whatever is next happens because the food is gone. Some background facts about thinking shifting. Donna's challenges with shifting also involve her challenges with inhibiting. Talking about the skills and strategies individually is an artificial means of learning about them and practicing them. However, in real life, they're all linked together and interwoven in our moment-by-moment needs. Thinking is also linked to emotions because you can't shift because you can't tolerate a change emotionally and how things are going to be if you shift, then you would probably be blocked from shifting, yet it wouldn't be because you can't think your way through the transition. It's your emotions at play. Also, what are you thinking about or locked into thinking about that could be generating feel-good feelings, and you don't want to let those go? So you don't want to shift your thinking because what you're thinking about feels so good. Teasing out the inability to do things is really a complex process. It involves the interface of our behaviors and thinking and emotions, even though this story is about thinking and shifting. If you relate to Donna's story, your action steps are to focus on sorting out which executive function skills are responsible for your current challenges. Then follow through on building and mastering those specific skills and supporting strategies. In self-management of how your feelings might be responsible for the greater part of the challenges that you're experiencing. Working with your regulatory skills so you remove whatever might derail you and keep you from resolving your challenges. So let's transition to our third story about Tom and what emotional shifting is, and some action steps about how you can develop it. Tom was in his mid-20s, and his emotions were stuck in the negativity ditch. He couldn't shift out of the state that he was in. He just had to wait it out until it shifted on his own. He didn't know what caused it to not be able to shift, because he certainly couldn't make it shift any sooner than it shifted. He wanted to take control of his life and get things moving in a more positive direction, but he just couldn't shift his emotions, and he didn't know what to do about it. He was diagnosed with chronic depression, ADHD, anxiety, and a host of other things. Point being that without knowing how to shift his state and get himself out of the emotional ditch, his depression persisted because this caused him to feel helpless and kind of hopeless about his emotional states and his life. Tom felt that he had been proactive with everything that he could read or listen to, as well as seeking help in therapy. He was hoping to find answers to this mysterious, emotionally frozen state, that is, until it thawed on its own. Nothing seemed to shed any light on this mystery, causing Tom to become even more depressed. He happened to stumble upon a podcast show for adults with ADHD, and instead of hearing about the typical stuff, he was hearing about executive function skills and strategies. He kept listening because this was the first time he heard this term and was learning of all the ways in which his executive function deficits could be impacting his life. In particular, the inability to shift emotionally without certain skills and strategies for doing this. He had to learn more, so he kept listening. Some background facts about emotional shifting. Think of your emotions as energy in motion. When you're balanced and well integrated or regulated, your emotions don't get stuck or block you from shifting and moving forward. Your emotions are tied to your thinking, so being able to shift your thoughts is as important to being able to shift your emotions. Emotions aren't necessarily good or bad. Rather, they're messengers, providing information that's important for us to act on. And when you get stuck and you can't shift out of the emotion, once you get the message or the information, that's a problem because you can't act on what it is that you've learned and you know. You can develop your ability to shift your emotional responses by practicing doing so outside of the charged moments, meaning practice being in one state and then in another, using cues or prompts to help you shift. You can ask yourself to recall events in the past that had you feeling different emotions and use that to help you shift emotions during practice time. A time when you were over the top happy, a time when you were scared, a time when you were curious, a time when you were puzzled, a time when you were creative, a time when you were angry, a time when you were joyful. The idea here is to realize that you can probably already shift from emotions or feelings to others fairly easily when you're not under pressure or in a stressful situation. Can you think of a time when this is true for you? If you relate to Tom's story, your action steps are to focus on coming up with a list of different emotions and when you experience them, like my example. To follow through on practicing shifting during non-stressful times between those different emotions and experiences, and notice how easy it is for you to shift, if it is. Notice if it's not easy and determine what's getting in the way, or ask someone for help to determine what's getting in the way. And self-management of how you feel about shifting from one emotion to the next and back and forth. And lastly, a quick story about Teresa and her excessive shifting of behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Teresa was in her mid-30s and had been diagnosed with severe ADHD, a learning disability, and chronic depression, none of which were being managed very well for her. So one of the ways this played out for Teresa in her day-to-day life was that she had a very high level of boredom and what's the point attitude. This attitude developed as a result of Teresa desperately trying to have things matter to her, to engage her, and they just didn't. She didn't know how to change so that she wouldn't be bored constantly and seeking the next new thing to try and lift her spirits and get her to connect. Clearly, the professionals that she was working with needed to get underneath the root cause of her boredom and shifting from thing to thing to thing, because it was feeding a vicious cycle of depression and a never-ending boredom and moving on to the next thing. Teresa really wondered how others could stay put on a task or in a relationship or anything for longer than a brief period of time, because she couldn't sustain interest or connection for very long at all. She wondered what it was that they were thinking or feeling or knew how to do that she didn't. There was also a feeling of emptiness that Teresa felt as a result of her lack of connection or being able to sustain a relationship with anything, whether it be a person, a task, or a hobby. Some background facts about excessive shifting. Whether it's tied to boredom or a lack of knowledge and ability to do things, or even another undiagnosed condition that's causing the rapid shifting, it's definitely important to uncover the root cause and to resolve it. If you relate to Teresa's story, your action steps are: focus on finding and working with a well-qualified professional who can help you determine the full picture of your rapid shifting and what drives it. Take whatever time is necessary to find the right person for you and the complete answer. Follow through on differentiating between the various reasons that you rapidly shift or continuously shift, rather than being able to stay put, with the help of a professional or a good friend as support. I know this is going to be challenging given the behavior that we're talking about, and yet it's going to help you to tailor your solutions. And self-management of any feelings of hopelessness or emptiness, and remind yourself that knowing the cause of the shifting is huge in terms of creating the right solutions, and that what you're experiencing right now is a temporary situation that will get resolved. Keep a lot of support around you and lean into those who are there for you during this very challenging time. And remember, no matter which of the stories you identify with, you need to cultivate a practicing mindset and come to look forward to practicing something every day that's moving you toward your destination. Whether you need to practice developing behavioral thinking or feeling shifting, or stop yourself from shifting way too often, you have work to do. And mind you, the work doesn't have to be hard or boring. It can actually be fun and playful. The idea is to make the process enjoyable so that you'll practice every single day and even look forward to doing so. That's the fun of play. It's not enough to know the steps that you need to take in the process. You can get that from a book or another informational product. You need the support, understanding, and a sense of community to help carry the load that we all sometimes feel. You might even need to talk to someone or have them walk beside you, step by step, to help guide your actions and follow through so you stay the course and you achieve your outcome. And again, if you don't have a place to go for this kind of support and knowledge about how to transform your life into what you've always wanted, I recommend that you put your name and your contact information in the form on either my Dr. Barbara Cohen or Adventures in Achievement website, so I can reach out to you right away by email and phone, and we can chat about your goals and your challenges and whether or not my programs are right for you. I say programs plural because I will soon be going live with 2 more programs to support your needs, a program for couples and a program for those who don't have ADHD or executive function deficits, who are seeking real understanding of how our amazing brains play out in real life. Couples in Motion and Adventures Companion will be available the first week of November. And I have an awesome bonus for those of you interested in enrolling in the Adventures in Achievement program. If you enroll between now and November the 4th, you will receive free access to one of the new programs for the first enrollment period, if you meet the criteria for which one you select. Be sure to get your information to me right away so that we can chat about the Adventures in Achievement program, as well as whether or not you meet the criteria for one of the bonus programs. I look forward to speaking soon and serving your many needs as well. Learning skills and strategies may sound like a lot of work, and maybe it is, but it doesn't have to be unpleasant work. In fact, it can be fun and playful if you approach it that way and give it those types of meanings. I've been playing with these skills and strategies for years now because I had to learn them just like you do, and I knew that I would be more inclined to stick with learning them if I could make this a fun experience for myself, which I did. And I've continued to be a student of my own life, as I hope you will be of yours, and stick with it until you've achieved mastery and the happier and more productive life that you want. If you want to be part of an online community of listeners to my show, be sure to reach out and friend me on Facebook so I can invite you into the Living Beyond ADHD community. We're going to be getting more active and engaged there, and I look forward to getting to know you and helping you in whatever ways I can. And if you want more than just the Facebook group, let's chat and see if my program is a good fit for you at this time. If it is, you may also qualify for the bonus of the free access to Couples in Motion or Adventures Companion for the first enrollment period. That is, if you're an enrolled member of Adventures in Achievement. You're not going to find any live links on any of my websites to just enroll in the program, because I chat with every single person before they enroll to ensure that you and the program are a good fit for each other. We are definitely an amazing and unique community, so don't miss out on this great opportunity to get your needs met. In addition to the bonus opportunity as an Adventures in Achievement student, you'll also receive an executive function assessment and the opportunity to discuss the results with me in our initial one-to-one appointment after you enroll. I've remodeled the program so we're focusing on you developing the executive function skills and strategies that you're missing in our working workshops every week, in addition to the weekly coaching that you receive as a member of the Adventures in Achievement program and community. And of course, you have access to the forum 24/7, and to me, they're helping you 6 days a week. A favorite quote. Albert Camus said, "There is no happiness if the things we believe in are different than the things that we do." So the question I have for you at this point of our journey together is, are you spending your precious, irreplaceable time being and doing what you believe in? I hope so, because this is your life we're talking about. So that's about it for today's episode about shifting behavioral, thinking, and emotional flow, as well as rein in excessive shifting, and a little about how you can start to develop these skills. Thanks for letting me know how much my show helps you and means to you. It means a lot to me to know that your life is getting a little bit better every time we get together. Listening to every podcast episode, maybe even more than once, is a small action step and something that can help you move your life forward one episode at a time, if you take the action on the steps that I include for you. If you just listen and hear the value, but you don't take action, you won't gain the value that's there for you. Remember, for things to change for the better for you, you have to change, which means that you need to do your very best every day to do something that'll lead you in the direction of your destination. I love chatting with you about your challenges and your needs and helping you know what options are available for real solutions and a more satisfying life. So reach out after you finish listening to this episode and let's set up a time to chat. If you'd like to do something more and you like what I'm doing here on the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcast or Stitcher or Google Play or YouTube or wherever you're listening from, and share this show with your friends and your family. Ratings and reviews are extremely helpful and they're greatly appreciated. The greater the number of reviews, the higher the ranking, and the easier it is for other people to find this show, people who also need this information. Plus, I'd love to know what more of you think about the show and the information that I share with you. So please review the show, review an episode. I really appreciate whatever it is that you're willing to do in advance of providing that gift. It helps me in my mission to make sure that all adults with focus and follow-through and self-management or executive function challenges have the information and skills to help them to live a happier, more productive, and wildly successful life. That's the driving force behind this show and the expanded content of the Adventures in Achievement program. It's also what drove me to create Couples in Motion, an Adventures Companion, because I was seeing how relationships were changing and getting off balance as a result of the work that my students are doing on themselves. Maintaining balance in your relationship with yourself is important, and it's also important to maintain balance in your other relationships. So feel free to rate the show, even if you don't choose to write a review. I'm grateful for whatever it is that you're willing to do that helps me to bring greater and greater benefit to greater and greater numbers of people. Thank you in advance for your kindness and your participation. Part of what I love about the growing community of Adventures in Achievement is the support that the members are receiving from one another. Years ago, I conceived of something I called the ADD Squad. The idea for the ADD Squad was an outgrowth of my growing up years watching the TV show Little House on the Prairie. I know I'm dating myself, where it didn't seem to matter whose barn burned down, because the town and the people rallied and raised a new barn so that family could be okay. I've always felt that the world might be a much better place if we viewed each other that way. In other words, seeing the needs of others and reaching out as a community to help one another because we can, rather than just thinking of our own needs. In the case of my online program, the reaching out has been the sharing of knowledge, support, and time to help one another, and it's amazing to be a part of it. We are not alone in this life of ours. We are all interconnected in such unique and mysterious ways, and we can see that even more so by developing our executive function skills and strategies. I know my episode production schedule has been a little erratic still, so if you don't want to have to remember to look for new episodes, just subscribe and the newest episode will be in your feed as soon as it's released. Thanks for listening. Until the next time, bye for now.
Thanks for your undivided attention. If you're eager to make positive changes in your life, head over to drbarbaracohen.com to see how Dr. B can help you today. Whether you love making changes with community support in a group environment or prefer one-to-one coaching or psychotherapy, you'll find all the information you need to get started at drbarbaracohen.com.